Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Naz Beheshti about lessons from her book, Pause, Breathe, Choose. Become the CEO of your well-being. Naz Beheshti, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you for having me, John.
It's really a pleasure. I'm excited to have a conversation with you today about your book in part, and really exploring the role of wellness and mindfulness within organizations and what we can do to better take care of ourselves and our people within our teams. As we get started today, I wanted to share Naz's bio with everybody. Naz Beheshti is the author of Pause, Breathe, Choose. Become the CEO of your well-being. She is an executive wellness coach, speaker, Forbes contributor, and CEO and founder of Promenaz, a corporate wellness company improving leadership effectiveness, employee engagement and well-being, company culture, and business outcomes. Clients include Nike, JP Morgan Chase, Omega Institute, UCSF, Columbia University, and Stanford University. She lives in New York City with her husband, and you can visit her online at www.nazbeheshti.com. Again, it is a real pleasure to have you with me today, and I appreciate your willingness to share your insights and experience with my audience. One of the things you talk about in your book, and you credit Steve Jobs as your first boss and mentor. Many people, though, say, he's a really intense guy. He had a reputation for being difficult to work with. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your early career, Steve Jobs as a mentor, how you connected and interacted with him, and how that experience inspired you to write your book.
Sure. So Steve was my first boss and mentor right out of college. I got my job as his executive assistant at Apple, which at the time didn't realize how influential and impactful it would be for the rest of my career, because it was my first job. I had nothing to compare it to. And at the time I was just, doing my job and supporting Steve and, loving it, but also really stressed. He was a very intense man, and with good reason. He was an iconic visionary and laser focused and demanded excellence. And he was a perfectionist. And I understood that part of him because I'm also somewhat of a perfectionist as well. And in hindsight, when I look back at my experience working with him, I really realized that he taught me the most important lesson, the most valuable lesson that I carry with me every day, which is well-being drives success. He prioritized his self-care. He had to keep up the energy, the creativity, innovation, being laser focused through his self-care practices. So he meditated daily. He had regular physical activity, a trainer several times a week. And he, had strong relationships with his family and ate really healthily and just had a holistic approach to his well-being, which I think is the main reason and fundamental to sustaining his success.
Yeah, well, and that's super interesting to hear about, your firsthand experience with him, because you hear the stories and you hear about the reputation, you hear about the intensity, and I've been around other people that are equally as intense, probably not quite as iconic and visionary and genius, as he was, but equally intense people. Mm-hmm. And I always wonder about how you can sustain that level of engagement and activity over a long period of time, and many people just can't. And so that's why you see ebbs and flows. He was one that always just seemed to produce, and it's great to hear about the mindfulness practices and the self care that he was involved in, and just making sure he was taking care of himself each and every day. And be working with a boss who's very intense, that's an intense experience, right? That
Right.
can be stressful. It can induce anxiety. But I also imagine, and you can speak more to this, but I imagine, being able to look to him and seeing how he prioritized self-care, that also reinforced to you the importance of it and gave you permission to do the same for yourself when you're early in your career.
Well, at the time, actually not. I wasn't as self-aware to do that. And I was young. And so, luckily I was blessed with good genes and, high metabolism and, just I had the energy. And it was later as I got older and wiser and things weren't the same as, when I was younger, that I realized this is not sustainable. And, I need my sleep. I need to eat well, like real food that gives me energy, not fake food, convenience food that drains my energy and makes me
Mhm.
feel, fatigued and foggy. And then my mindfulness practice came much later. So it was really looking back, and connecting the dots and realizing, wow, Steve really cracked the code and he did it for himself. And now I'm going to try all that stuff later, not during the time that I was working for him. I was just hustling and trying to like keep
Sure,
afloat
sure.
and, really stressed and just, trying to be a few steps ahead of Steve.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose that's kind of a typical story for, young adults who have boundless energy and ambition and are ready to just to go, go, go.
Right.
And it does catch up with you eventually though. So
Yes,
so that's
definitely.
great. That's
Not
great that
sustainable.
no, that's great that you were able to reflect on that later and learn those lessons from him. And I don't know if you know this. It would be interesting to know his history a little bit, if that's something he came to later in life, or if that's something he had recognized earlier on and had practiced throughout his career. I don't know if you know that.
Well, he went to India and had life-changing experience, which is similar to what happened to me as well before I started my company. But yeah, he got into meditation. I don't know how old he was or when, but it was prior. And, he was actually more spiritual and in tune with himself and his intuition. I don't know from when it started, but India was a really impactful
Yeah.
trip for him.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. So all of this experience was formative for you, young in your career, coming out, first job,
Mhm.
first real professional experience, and then from there, though, you use that experience to catapult you into the rest of your career, and eventually you start your own business and you write a book. So how did all this shape you and influence you into writing that book? And then we can dig into some of the lessons and the topics that you discussed there.
So after Apple, I worked at a tech startup and wore many hats at once, and gained lots of different skills working at a startup. And then I went to Yahoo, which was the Google of its time back in the day in the early 2000s, and then AstraZeneca. So I had over a decade of experience in large Fortune 500 companies as well as a small tech startup. And throughout that time, it was great learning new skills. But after a while, after the novelty of a new job, wore off, I was unfulfilled and lacking energy and just fulfillment. And I was also just really stressed too at certain times. And the companies didn't have any support. There was no corporate wellness programs, employee well-being. So I realized that there was a gap in the system, and I wanted to fill that gap and help people who were like me, stressed and didn't have the tools to manage stress and build resilience. So I think resilience is really important, because when you do have to face something stressful or challenging, you are resilient and have the tools and energy to be able to optimize that experience in whatever way. And so I went back to school to become a holistic health coach. I have a psychology background. I also got certified as a transformational coach and advanced NLP practitioner. And I was in school, or I'm sorry, I was in school and work at the same time, eventually wanting to start my own business. But before I did that, I saved up all my vacation from AstraZeneca and took a month off, and actually 6 weeks off, and went to India. And it was a life-changing experience, that trip. And the day I came back, I had some very meaningful encounters with some, monks, and then the Dalai Lama for a few days. I spent at his residence for a 5-day teaching. And literally the day I returned from my trip, I quit my job and I started Prana Naz. It was in the works. It wasn't something, just really spontaneous. I was supposed to do it like in a year from then, but I just did it earlier because everything was pointing towards like, living an authentic life and not living one more day doing something I don't want to be doing. And I couldn't continue going to work every day, even though I had a ton of autonomy and I was doing really well at my job, but I just couldn't do it internally. Just I needed to, break free from the golden handcuffs, as I called it, and get out of my comfort zone and do what I was meant to be doing. So that's when I started Prana Naz, which is a corporate wellness company, and do executive wellness coaching. And I truly love what I do and finally have found my purpose and passion.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Academy. Courses, micro-credentials, and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. All HCI Academy courses, micro-credentials, and certificates are designed, developed, and delivered by award-winning and internationally renowned scholars, educators, thought leaders, executives, and practitioners. Our courses, micro-credentials, and certificates will help you make your mark on the future of work and make an immediate impact in your organizations. Check out the HCI Academy and our many course offerings and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us. We all go through that kind of a journey where we're trying to learn about ourselves and figure out the right path for us.
Mhm.
And I think, yes, some people are really lucky to tap into that really early on. But most of us kind of zigzag and we do all
Right.
sorts of things, right? And ultimately we have to have some of those bad experiences, uh, or not even bad experiences, but we just have to have those experiences to then learn more about ourselves and understand what
Mhm.
what drives us and what connects us and what is sustainable for us. And so I'm sure all the jobs you had that looking back now, you're like, oh, that wasn't a good fit for me. I'm sure it was a perfectly good fit for plenty of other people, but
Mhm.
for you, it wasn't. And I felt the same way throughout my career as I've
Mhm.
been involved in different roles. And it's not that I'm not capable. It's not that I'm not as equally skilled or competent as somebody else. It just wasn't for me. Like it wasn't a
Mhm.
good fit, and it was draining rather than invigorating, and I wasn't
Mhm.
excited about doing it. And so finding that thing, that passion, that purpose, ultimately, I think that's what we need to try to do. And
Right.
there's no shame, in doing something that maybe isn't your favorite job to provide for your family. And if there's honor in all sorts of work, don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
if we are privileged enough to have the opportunity to chase our dreams and our passions, then we should, because it's going to lead to far more fulfilling life, and we're going to be able to impact and help so many people in the process.
Absolutely. And just to add, I don't actually regret any of the jobs I had, even though it wasn't the right fit long term. I actually was really excited about all of them in the beginning. If not, I would have never done it,
Sure.
So I learned a lot, and all of the skills I learned and the experiences and the people I met have actually, they're interconnected with what I do today. I mean, just going to doctor's offices every day as a pharmaceutical sales rep, I learned that there's, again, a huge wellness gap that, most of office visits are stress related, and the doctors don't have the time to get to the root of the stress. They prescribe something or say, come back to me at this time after doing this, but they can't like sit there, and they just don't have the time. They're not a coach, they're a doctor.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of also filled that gap of helping people manage their stress and really coach them and develop new healthy habits that are personalized for them.
Yeah, that's great. And so let's dive into your book a little bit more. I love the title: Pause, Breathe, Choose, Become the CEO of Your Well-Being. Um, the pause, breathe, choose, connecting to mindfulness and wellness, that makes so much sense. But I really love the subtitle to your book: Becoming the CEO of Your Own Well-Being. Maybe you can talk to that a little bit, why you chose that subtitle and how that fits into your paradigm and framing of the work that you do.
Well, I always think about becoming the CEO of your well being because it's really about taking charge of your life, and well being in a holistic sense of the word is being well in all areas of your life. It's not just about, fitness and nutrition, where a lot of people think that that's all health is, but well being is that broader topic and feeling of being happy and energized and healthy and prosperous and just showing up as your best self in all areas of your life. And when I say, the CEO of your well-being, I encourage readers and people to think of their well-being as like a company they run. And so when, you're promoting good mental, emotional, physical, environmental, professional, and just overall emotional well-being, you are allowing all those different departments in your company to run well and smoothly. But as a CEO, you are, in charge of making all the right choices for all those departments of your life to be running smoothly. And so, asking yourself, are you operating or performing at the top of your game and like feeling happy and socially connected and purposeful? And how are all these departments running, and constantly checking in with that? And like your self-care, your career, your relationships, all those different departments in your life, are those running smoothly? And if not, what do you need to do to change that? Because you are the CEO, you have the ultimate power and authority to make the changes you need to make sure that your well-being company is thriving, right? So I just love how empowering becoming the CEO of your well-being is, and not just empowering, but it's really about living your best life. I mean, that's like the bottom line is when you are the CEO of your well-being, you are taking charge and living your best life.
Yeah, I really love that. And it is a really powerful framing, because, life is tough, life is messy, and there's all these external pressures and constraints that are placed upon us. And so within our sphere of influence, we have all these outside pressures, and it's really, really easy to fall into the trap of just feeling like we're the victim of our circumstances.
Absolutely.
But framing it as I'm my own CEO of my well-being, that puts the power back in your hands. It doesn't take away the fact that there are external pressures and constraints, and we can't, I can't magically, wave my wand and all of a sudden get rid of all the social unrest and strife and political nonsense. And those things are still going to be there, and they're still going to impact you. But you
Mhm.
can choose how you're going to respond to them, and you can choose your daily habits, and that impact your well-being. You do have control over that,
Right.
even if you don't have control over everything else outside of your sphere of influence. And that's a powerful thing to remember. And frankly, it's something that a lot of people don't, they don't remember about
Mhm.
themselves and their lives, and
Hmm.
they end up falling into the trap of just a fixed mindset and feeling stuck. And
Right.
that's like the worst thing in my mind, is if you don't have any more hope and you just feel stuck and you just feel like beat down by the daily grind, and there's
Hmm.
nothing you can do about it, that's a really tough place to be.
Absolutely. And that's what chronic stress is. If you're feeling that way, stuck, helpless, hopeless for more than 6 months, chronic stress is a killer stress. And that could lead to dis-ease. It could lead to suicidal ideation at worst case. I mean, it's really a terrible place to be. And right now, especially during the pandemic, I mean, we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel finally, thankfully. However, it's been a year and people have been experiencing chronic stress. Mental health is at the top of HR's priorities right now in companies. And actually, I'm doing more talks about becoming the CEO of your well-being than I was pre-pandemic, even though the book just came out, recently. But everything in that book and my MAP method and become the CEO of your well-being is what I've been teaching for about a decade now. So it's nothing new for me. It's just that I finally decided to put it in a book, thanks to Steve Jobs, who appeared in my dream and told me to write a book. But the concept, my method, all this is not new for me. It's just finally having it accessible to everyone. And now companies are really, it's resonating with them and saying, I want you to talk about becoming the CEO of your well-being because our employees need it.
Yeah, yeah, I think everyone needs it.
Yeah,
And it's
true.
an important reminder, to those who are listening who say, I got it covered. I practice mindfulness, I exercise, I eat right, I get a good amount of sleep. Well, that's great. And I hope everyone listening falls into that camp. But regardless, it's still, we need the consistent reminder, because it's just so darn easy to fall back into old negative patterns of
Right.
behavior, negative thought patterns, and nobody is immune from it. And particularly when you're in the middle of a pandemic,
Mhm.
and you have Black Lives Matter and everything around that, like just the difficulties that everyone is feeling, that we
Mhm.
have to recommit ourselves to these practices. One of the things that I know you talk a lot about is mindfulness, and maybe we can talk about some of the methods that you suggest to practice mindfulness, but how it's really the foundation of authentic self-discovery and that life well lived. So, for you, what is mindfulness? How do we practice it? And what do you suggest to your clients?
Well, I always meet my clients and people where they're at. Whoever does not have a mindfulness practice, that's okay. Just I talk about just starting really super small and creating a tiny habit of sitting still for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, not 20 or 30 or 10, just 2 minutes, and just focusing on your breath. I also recommend, if they don't want to do that on their own, there's a ton of apps like Headspace and Calm to get started that way. But the trick and the key is to just start really small so that you don't need a ton of intrinsic motivation to keep it up. And if you attach that small habit to a current routine that you already do in the day, according to BJ Fogg, who's a behavior scientist at Stanford, who's cracked the code on how to create sustainable tiny habits. It's as simple as just like, I have this RPM method, rise, p, meditate. So it's right, I rise, I use the restroom, and right after that, I do that every single day. Right after that, I meditate. So what is one thing that our listeners can attach a new habit, whether it's meditation or something, to something they already do, whether it's brushing their teeth every morning, starting the coffee pot, whatever it is, and starting small and then building up from there. But start small is key to making it sustainable and growing from there. But really, mindfulness for me is about awakening your mind and your heart from autopilot. And it really enables you to experience life unfolding in the present moment and unlocks your ability to tap into your intuition and creativity so that you can receive new information with a beginner's mind and develop a new perspective. So In short, mindfulness is really presence of heart, and it unveils your truest self and desires. So who wouldn't want to be more mindful and get that, heart head alignment and, improve your basically emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. It does connect very closely to our emotional intelligence
Mhm,
and our EQ, right? Like
mhm.
we have to be able to have that personal alignment and connection. Otherwise, we don't have much chance of meaningfully engaging, authentically engaging with those around us. And if I'm a leader and I have a team of people and I have the best of intentions, I want to support them and I want to help them maximize their potential, be their best selves.
Mhm.
I'm not going to know how to do that. I'm not going to be able to connect with them meaningfully, authentically at all if I am not in tune with myself first, because we all have our own baggage and our own
Mhm.
biases and prejudices and just all the stuff of life that we end up projecting onto the people around us if we're not first
Right.
aware of what we're carrying around.
Right.
And that's one of the problems and the things we see in relationships, whether it's home life, work life, whatever.
Mhm.
Problematic relationships usually at the core, there's just miscommunication and misunderstanding, and it comes from that misalignment.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And that's how when I coach my clients, it always starts from the inside. And then when they themselves are, mindful and everything, I mean, I echo everything you said, because then they're able to be a better leader for everyone else. So it really does start from your inside, from yourself.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Naz, it has been a really great pleasure to talk with you today. The time has flown by. Before we close, though, I did want to give you a chance to share with listeners a little bit more about where they can find you, find your book, and give us the last word on the topic for today.
So everyone, you can find me at nazbeheshti.com, nazbeheshti.com. My book is there. You could also find it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and all major retailers. And then my corporate wellness site is prananaz.com, prananaz.com. And I'm on all social media as Naz Beheshti on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And then Facebook is nazbeheshtispeaker.com. And I'm also on Clubhouse as Naz Beheshti. So, and I just encourage you to take the first step in becoming the CEO of your well-being. Take charge of your life so that you could show up in all areas of your life and live your best life. And start today if you haven't already.
I love it. Amen. A wonderful message. We need to speak that and share that more and more and more. I think everyone needs it. Thank you for all the good work you do. Thanks for joining me today and for sharing your wisdom and your experience with all of my listeners. I hope listeners will reach out, get connected with Naz, check out her company, check out her book, find out more about what she can do to help you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership, the journey of becoming a truly remarkable leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There is no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of your problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.